sige pa, sige pa. Sige pa, sige pa. We should set our beers like this on the...
Yeah, that's sure.
Let's do that. It's just more, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we're here in Bosco with Peter Bellwood, and we're asking him a few questions about Austronesian history.
Actually, before you start, just a minute. Should I look at the camera, look at that, or look at you? What do you think's the best thing? Look at the camera. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, start again.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's okay. Let it roll. Let it roll. It's fine. Okay, Peter. How did you get your start in prehistory, and what interested you most in prehistory?
Well, this goes back many years. I originally, of course, left school when I was 15, back in the 50s. My father died when I was very young, and I worked in a shoe machinery factory for a couple of years as an apprentice. Eventually, I discovered that work in a factory was rather boring, so I went and read in the local library, got books out on archaeology, decided I liked it. Went back to school for 2 years, got a scholarship to Cambridge, and then finished a BA in archaeology in 1966, which is now 40 years ago, actually, this year. After that, I took a lecturing job at the University of Auckland in New Zealand and have been working on the Austronesians ever since. But I should perhaps add that when I was at Cambridge, I studied Romans and Anglo-Saxons, and those are people whose archaeology is bound up with history. And of course, Austronesians are also people whose archaeology is bound up with not so much history, but oral tradition and comparative linguistics. I mean, linguistic records of a historical nature. So they're quite similar fields in some ways.
Peter, what advice would you have for graduate students in Austronesian studies?
Well, the first thing, of course, they need to decide is what particular branch of Austronesian studies they're interested in. I mean, we have archaeology, which is the history of material culture, found in or on the ground. We have comparative linguistics, which is the history of the languages, as reproduced from comparing them and reconstructing their ancestral forms. And then, of course, we also have genetic history of the people themselves, mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosomes, and skeletal anthropology. So there are different branches to what we might call Austronesian prehistory. I mean, I'm an archaeologist, so basically I specialize in excavation. In other words, archaeology. Archaeology is a series of techniques for excavating things from the ground and then studying them. So for any prospective graduate student, they'd have to, first of all, of course, be qualified in one of those fields, but they'd have to be previously qualified in order to be able to do a PhD, and then they have to decide what particular aspect and region, because Austronesia is a huge part of the world. It goes from Madagascar to Easter Island, so there are many, not only time debts, time changes, 5,000 years of prehistory, but also a vast area and, of course, many thousands of islands.
How many times have you been to the Batanes, and what are the names of some of the most significant sites that you've found?
Yeah, well, I came here with Dr. Bong Dizon from the National Museum of the Philippines in 2001, and we've been here 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is our 5th fieldwork project in the Batanes, and I've been here 6 times now. The reason, of course, I came here, looking back over the years, is because I was interested in the ancestry of Austronesians, their languages and cultures, and it is very clear from both languages and archaeology that their ancestors originally came from Taiwan, southern China, Taiwan, into the Philippines, into Luzon, and then onwards into Indonesia, the Pacific in one direction, Madagascar in the other. The sites that we found here, the earliest one is Torongan Cave on the eastern coast of Itbayat Island. People were living in that cave, dropping broken pottery about 4,000 years ago. Then here in Bataan, we have an important site at Sunget, just above Mahatau, where people were living about 3,200 years ago, making pottery. fishing, they had pigs and dogs. They also had small amounts of nephrite and slate artifacts from Taiwan. They certainly had contacts with Taiwan right throughout Batanes prehistory, probably through the island of Lanyu or Orchid Island. Then we have another site in Itbayat again called Anaro, where we know that they were working nephrite into little ornaments between about possibly 2,500 and maybe 1,500 years ago. And those nephrite ornaments appear to have been traded onwards into the rest of the Philippines, Sarawak in East Malaysia, southern Vietnam, around about 2,000 years ago. In fact, we're going to do more work on that site and try to get better chronology for this nephrite working tradition.
Peter, what is your excavation process?
Well, to find archaeology, you have to look, of course. Well, you can look for caves and you can look for pottery on the ground surface. You can ask people what they find in their fields. You can look in road cuttings or beaches. On Batan Island, we have the problem that 1,000 years ago there was a massive eruption of Mount Uriah that buried everything to a metre or more in depth underneath volcanic ash. And of course, it's very difficult to find things if they're buried under a metre-thick layer of ash. So we have to look for cuttings, places where artifacts are eroding out of the ground. In the cases of Sabtang and at Bayat, the ash shower problem isn't present, and most of the sites are much closer to the present surface, so we can see them more easily. The pottery is scattered around. Sometimes we find caves, small caves, and we excavate those. Other times, of course, we excavate. Many of our sites are on hilltops, for instance, where people used to live in ancient times and drop all their pottery around the sides. And Anaro and Sunget are sites of that type. There are many of them in Batanes. The later ones have become known as ijangs, or fortifications, as described in 1687 by William Dampier, the first European voyager to come to the Batanes, who recorded people living in terraced fortifications with ladders and walls surrounded by cliffs, protecting themselves against their enemies. And many of those sites, of course, still survive here.
Can you tell us about the discoveries of nephrite in the Batanes and the significance of that?
Yes, we have found some broken nephrite pieces in the Anaro site on Itbayat. They are the result of working ornaments, making ornaments. Most of the ornaments, of course, were taken to other places and we haven't found them. What we have found are the fragments, the remnants, the discarded pieces left behind after they were working them and they threw them away. Now that nephrite has been tracked to Taiwan. This involves two people working with me. One is Hong Xiaochun, a PhD student of mine from Taiwan, and Xiaochun is studying the trade and manufacture of nephrite in Taiwan and in the Philippines. She has been assisted by Yoshi Izuka, who is a geochemist from Academia Sinica in Taipei, who is using electron probe microscopy to try and differentiate the different kinds of nephrite from China, Southeast Asia, Taiwan. And so far he's been able to show that the bulk of the green nephrite found in the Philippines is from Taiwan. There is another variety, a white one, that is probably from Batangas in Luzon, but the green variety, as far as we know, all of that was brought here from Taiwan in prehistoric times.
David, cut?
A previous staging ground before they got to Batanes.
And if you want to if you have anything to
Beinan,
say about Beinan.
Yes. Well, why don't you interview Xiao Chun on Beinan? She knows all about that. She's very good. I mean, she does jade and stuff. She'll tell you all about it.
Oh,
And
okay.
it'll sort of liven it up and give you somebody else.
Yeah. That's a good idea. I'll have to go get her. Okay.
She'll probably be very shy, but it'd be nice to
that's
have.
okay.
You don't want me all the time. It's good to have other people, isn't it?
Definitely, sure. Okay. We're here in Bosco in the Batanes Islands with Peter Bellwood, and we'd like to ask him a few questions about Austronesian studies. Peter, how would you explain the Austronesian movement in the Pacific so that ordinary people can understand?
Yeah, well, this goes back a very long way, of course. Things in history, things don't just start from nothing. I mean, as everybody knows, everything has a reason that happened before. And we all know that human beings evolved in Africa and spread probably, 2 million years ago at least through Asia. Most of the human beings in the world were hunters and gatherers, or all of them were, until about 10,000 years ago. That means that they were hunters of wild animals, collectors of wild plants. Around about 10, 12,000 years ago, people in what we now call the Middle East, in places like Israel, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and in China, central China, particularly the Yangtze and Yellow River basins, they began to cultivate cereals. They became farmers. They settled down in villages, domesticated crops like wheat and barley in the Middle East, rice and millet in China. They also kept pigs and dogs and cattle and goats in the case of the Middle East, and sheep. And as a result of all this, over 1,000 or more years or so, their populations grew quite dramatically, because farmers, of course, have much larger populations than hunters and gatherers. They have more children, they have more food, and for many reasons their populations are simply larger. By 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, in China, many of the central areas were very densely settled. And we don't really know exactly why people went to the Pacific. We never will know that, because they haven't told us. They had no writing. We don't have records. But my guess would be that with the increase in demographic pressure, if you like, in central China, people began to move into southern China, growing rice, moving down the coast, building boats, sailing to offshore islands. We can trace them. Well, there are famous sites, for instance, around the Yangtze Delta dating to about 7,000 before Christ, and 6,000 before Christ, that have this kind of evidence. They made pottery, they kept pigs, they made boats, and they had paddles. They knew how to sail, or at least they knew how to paddle. Whether they had sails, we don't know. But by about 5,000 years ago, some people moved as farmers to Taiwan. Now, they weren't the first people in Taiwan. All over Southeast Asia, Indonesia, New Guinea, Australia, of course, they'd been hunter-gatherers since 50 or 60,000 years ago. And in the case of Australia and New Guinea, those people are still there. They're farmers in New Guinea, but they're still hunter-gatherers, or they were hunter-gatherers until the late 18th century in Australia, when Europeans began to settle the landscape. In the case of Taiwan, they moved as farmers from China, speaking the earliest reconstructible forms of Austronesian languages. Now, we can only reconstruct those from present-day languages. We don't have any writing that tells us what Austronesian was like 5,000 years ago. But reconstructing from present-day languages, comparing, we know that Taiwan is the earliest point of departure from the Asian mainland for these people. They then came into the Philippines about 4,000 years ago, into the Western Pacific about 3,500. And they kept on moving, of course. They reached New Zealand about AD 1200, Madagascar about AD 5 or 600. This is the greatest migration in world history, spreading more than halfway around the world, running through something like 4,000 years of continuous time. They didn't migrate instantly. It took a very long time. They had to innovate good boat technology in order to sail between islands that are a long way apart. They had to have good agricultural systems to survive on many of these islands. Many of them, of course, also hunted and gathered as well, but agriculture was very important for their maintenance, especially in places like Batanes. So that is really the only way we can explain it. Ultimately, probably a result of slowly increasing population in the area we now call China. These were not Chinese. At that time, China was not occupied by Chinese people. The Chinese conquered China in the last few centuries before Christ, just like the Romans conquered Europe. The Chinese are not natives of all of China. They come from the Yellow River, and their history is one of very recent expansion, replacing many of the native peoples of southern China. And unfortunately, of course, nowadays the languages of those native people no longer survive, because Chinese now has become, or at least the Chinese languages have become so dominant. So it's very difficult to trace the roots back beyond Taiwan. We know they must have come from mainland Asia, from southern China, but because of the expansion of imperial China, many of the records have now been erased. Okay.
Can you tell us now a little bit more about Austronesian Taiwan, the evolution of Taiwan as a potential Austronesian homeland?
Yeah.
And for example, when did they come to Taiwan, and when did their expansion and movement outward begin?
Yeah, I think it's probably best to call Taiwan not so much an origin place, but a staging ground. We know that the earliest Austronesians moved into Taiwan about maybe 5,500 years ago. They appear to have remained there without moving further for about 1,000 years. Possibly their boats weren't very efficient, and they found it difficult to sail beyond. But around about 4,000 years ago, somebody must have invented perhaps a stronger kind of plank-built boat. We'll probably never know for certain. Maybe plank-built boats almost like the ones they use nowadays still in Lanyu off southeastern Taiwan. Although I'm guessing here, I have to say, there's no proof of this. But about 4,000 years ago, there was perhaps some innovation in boat building, and people then came to Batanes. And it's through here that I think they went onwards to Luzon and through the whole of the Austronesian world, so that if we have, say, a few hundred people settling Batanes in 4,000 years ago, it might almost be true that their descendants around the world nowadays, 350 million Austronesian-speaking people, descend to a fairly large degree from these ancient founding populations. Not entirely, of course, because there have been many other population movements into Southeast Asia, and there are many native peoples in Melanesia and the Philippines, that is, extremely ancient people who speak Austronesian languages, who certainly were not part of the original migration, but they have adopted the languages. But the original migrant group still in some way must have given rise in terms of their genes, their languages, their material culture to the lifestyles of many millions of Austronesians at European contact and since.
Peter, what can you tell us about your theory of the Batanes as a staging ground for Neolithic peoples in the movement regarding Taiwan?
Well, the Batanes are closest, of course, to Taiwan. Once you leave Taiwan and go through Lanyu, then you hit Batanes, unless you go around the outside and hit Luzon. But it would be difficult to imagine them migrating without coming through here. I mean, it's possible they went to Luzon first, but we will never know for certain. So the Batanes would have been perhaps the first point of establishment of Austronesian-speaking populations off the island of Taiwan about 4,000 years ago. Small groups who then grew in size, continued onwards. Perhaps they were added to by other groups coming behind them from Taiwan to increase the numbers, and eventually, of course, they filled up the whole of the Philippines, Indonesia and the Pacific, and Malaysia and southern Vietnam.
What we can ask you a general question about the Ivatan language.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think we can learn from studying Ivatan language today, and from trying to map the different dialects of the language today? This is David Blundell's current project.
Yes. Well, Ivatan and Itbayaten are the two languages of the Batanes Islands. You probably have to ask a linguist questions like that. But from talking with linguists, my understanding is that the Batanic languages, which include the Yami language of Lanyu, are probably quite ancient in their separation from Taiwan. Linguistically, there is a very important theory that the languages spoken beyond Taiwan all form a subgroup known as Malayo-Polynesian, because they share a number of specific innovations in common. It's possible that the Batanes Islands were the area, together with perhaps northern Luzon, where many of these innovations in verbs and pronoun forms occurred, and then spread on through the whole Austronesian world from this area. So the Batanic languages appear as a group to have a very considerable antiquity. But I should add here that the Yami language of Lanyu may be a recent movement back from Itbayat into the islands off southeastern Taiwan, possibly replacing a much older population. That at least is what I think many linguists would certainly believe in. And it's possible that movement took place as a result of the trade in nephrite. Many of the native people in the northern Philippines were very interested in getting access to nephrite raw material from Taiwan, and it might have led them to migrate backwards eventually towards Taiwan, from where, of course, their ancestors came originally many thousands of years before. Okay.
Well, thank you. That's Stephen Martin and David.
All right, thank you very much.
David Blundell reporting from Bosco in
Batanes, good,
Batanes
yeah.
Islands.
Did it
Thank
make
you.
sense?
Thank you very much.
Does it all add up? Read any linguistics. Anyway. No, I don't. I mean, there's quite a little sort of. I think many Filipinos would love to think that everything evolved in the Philippines. There's always this kind of chauvinistic viewpoint, and it's very difficult to get that. Once you tell them their ancestors came from somewhere like Taiwan or Vietnam or somewhere, they get very worried and think, oh, you know, we're not the original people. But of course, that's silly. I mean, in some ways. But there are politics involved in all of this.
Yes, is it true that everything is actually made in Taiwan? Culture.
Are you putting this in the
history,
film? You better not quote me on
chips,
that. Yeah.
telephones.
Austronesians, yes.
Austronesians.
Well, to a limited extent, yes. The languages and some of the material culture. Maybe not all the people. I mean, don't forget people like the Agta, you know, the so-called Negritos. They speak Austronesian. So do people in the Solomon Islands. I mean, because they've adopted the languages. They don't come from Taiwan. Many native people in Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Fiji, they're coastal New Guinea. They're not Formosan. They are native Pacific people who've adopted the languages, and that's been quite common.
Yes, I would like to reiterate that the everything is made in Taiwan theory is actually my theory.
Yes. But it probably has to be modified slightly, both for computer chips and for Austronesians, I think.
I don't know if you got to read the piece that I wrote for Byron.
Realize that.
Look at it. I mean, look at your paintings. Your paintings are so expressive of culture and humanity and what's going on. And then this one. I mean, we can critique this on your own, and we can see like there's no even culture.
My face hurts.
Byron!
Byron!
A picture.
Picture. Look tough, Gaga. Serious eyes. Smile.
Tunay naman, Mark. Fast back.
Oh yeah, look how serious. May solo ka mo, gusto? Ay, may join ka mo kan mama mo? Sino po diyan na pa-picture? Ah, napaka. Si Mr. Loreto. Oh, ano tiyo? Ano kay tiyo? Ayusin mo ito. They were really fascinated by it.
Very dark, David. Can you? I suppose you can. Yeah. Well, this lady's on the. She's on the poster, isn't she? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. They painted.
May pepero? Asna. Bakit? Dapat ako po yung moy. Kenneth Elementary. Elementary. Kenneth ka na.
Beautiful. Yes. Is this? Where is this from? Yes.
We should just follow them. They're troopers.
Yes, we'll be here tomorrow.
30 plus.
30 plus. Huh? Okay. Hello.
It's only.
Yeah, too early. Yeah. Too bad. And finish your college. Finish your college.
A Japanese came to our province, especially here in Ivana. They came to our house, then they stay here for some days. Then that Japanese have a big book. Then he began to tell us the story about the Orchid Island. According to them, all kinds of trees and names of fishes are similar to the trees here in Batanes. And according to, in the early days, according to them, those people in Orchid Island, they do not wear clothes. They wear the bark of trees. They wear that. For that time, they were still very poor, and they used to to dress in what they have there in Orchid Island. Then, according to continue. While they were here in Batanes, we used to go to the field and visit all our fields, and as soon as they see those trees, they immediately tell us that this kind of tree is found in Orchid Island. And in that time, when they stay here for a long time, for some 2 weeks, and after visiting our fields here, that Japanese like what we call antique, these old kinds of basket, old kinds of this original suit of girls, what we call vakul, and men, what we call kanai. That is where here in, that is to protect themselves while raining and also at hot time. So as they were here, we were telling many stories, and he used to show us the big book that he was making there while he was in Orchid Island. Then we have, in that time, we used to compare the life there in Orchid Island and also life here in Batanes. And according to them, since that place is still, they were very, very poor. They were more poor than the people here in Batanes in those days. So, in making house, just the same as in making house, they used to gather this kogon, the reeds, rattan, for building their house. And they show us the places where they visited there. But in making the house, it is just the same as we do here in Batanes. So we were very surprised that that Japanese was very good, and it told us stories about Batanes, about Orchid Island, and according to them, for some years, people of Orchid Island came from the Itbayat, because that place they speak the dialect here, not so very fluent speaking, but very similar to our speaking here, our dialect here. So from that time, we were very happy to know that that place is almost a part of Batanes. And sometimes those people, for maybe for 2 or 3 times, they came here to Ivana, and then they went to exhibit their way of dancing and
Continue mo, Lolo.
nanda ko doon sa ori.
Nakangay daw.
While they were here, the people of Ivana met them in the school, because there were very many. And while in school, we had a program. They give us, they show us their dance in Orchid Island, and also the way they pound rice. Then, then afterwards, they used to go around and mingle with the people. Naturally, we know each other very little, because they are not, they know how to speak the dialect, but not so much. But they can understand our dialect, Ivatan. Now, when that Japanese was intending to return to their home in Tokyo, what he likes is this old kind of tools that are used here in the early days. They gather this old basket, old this vakul, what the woman use, and also kanay. They used to gather. They don't like this new kind of newly made